Abuse doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is supported by deeply ingrained beliefs and behaviors that allow it to thrive, often invisibly, not just in our interpersonal relationships, but in society as a whole. So what are those beliefs? Entitlement, objectification, expectation of submission, and a complete lack of accountability. These are known as the 4 pillars of abuse. Today, I'm going to take you on a 4-part journey into the belief and value systems that drive abusive behavior. We will unpack each pillar in detail and how they play into abusive dynamics. I first stumbled on the 4 pillars of abuse when I was doing my own research on domestic violence and emotional abuse. But gaining this awareness has been so helpful for me in my healing because it has helped me make sense of the abuse, which is such a key part of the healing process. If you ever question, was I abusive? Then this series of videos will without a doubt pull you out of that gaslighting. And who am I? I am Jackie Faber, a trauma-informed spiritual life coach and a DV survivor. I'm sharing my knowledge, education, and experience to help others identify abusive patterns within their relationship and help them on the path towards healing. If this video sounds like it's meant for you, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can receive notifications when the other videos in this series are released. Emotional and psychological abuse is prevalent in our society, never mind our interpersonal relationships. So understanding these pillars is going to be so helpful for your healing work because having this knowledge will help you spot toxic people so you can set boundaries with them and keep yourself safe. I know that I can't take no more. It ain't no lie. Did you know that entitlement has 3 definitions? The fact of having a right to something. So this would be our basic human rights. It is a fact that I have a right to these things. There is also the amount to which a person has a right. For example, in my job, I am entitled to 3 weeks of vacation time and 5 sick days. These are my entitlements. But then there is this. The belief that one is inherently deserving of privilege or special treatment. This is the place of your average abuser. And you know this because of the double standards. Now, the very presence of entitlement in someone's belief system naturally creates a power imbalance because they believe that they are entitled to special things, which elevates them while devalues you. I know that I can't take no more. It ain't no lie. Entitlement drives abusive behavior. It's the abuser's sense of entitlement that leads them to believe that they are owed specific behaviors, emotional responses, or control over their victim. These expectations can range from expecting constant attention to emotional labor to controlling how the victim behaves or dresses or interacts with other people. For example, an abuser might feel entitled for their partner to drop everything to cater to their needs, to be available at all times, or to suppress their own needs and desires in favor of the abusers. And this is what happened in my relationship. If my internal compass was not pointed at him 100% of the time, he would lose it. If I was out doing something without him, he would be texting me nonstop. If he was yelling my name from across the house and I didn't drop whatever I was doing to go see him, he would devalue me in some way. If I was in the middle of doing something for myself, whether it was a workout or a meditation, he would insert himself into my presence. He felt entitled to my domestic labor. He dictated which jobs around the house were women's jobs and which jobs were men's jobs. And when I would complain at the inequality of division, he would say, well, you're just better at those things than me, but then criticize me if they were not up to his standards. He felt entitled to my money going into my wallet to take cash or credit cards without my permission. He felt entitled to my body. He would grope and grab me whenever he felt like it, even if it made me feel uncomfortable. He would wake me up from a dead sleep to initiate sex. And he would use sexual coercion, trying to emotionally manipulate me to have sex with him when I wasn't in the mood, saying things like, you're my partner, it's your responsibility. Abusers' demands are not just extreme. In some cases, they are inconsistent and vague. I would ask direct questions. How do you want X done? And I would get answers like, you should know by now. You feel like you're constantly jumping through hoops, and it creates a situation where the victim is set up to fail because their demands are ever-changing and unachievable, ensuring that the victim can never meet them. You out that door, baby, bye, bye, bye. Now, this is where things get fucked up. When the victim inevitably falls short of these impossible expectations, the abuser shifts blame onto them. They will say things like, "Can't you do anything right?" Or, "If you loved me, you would do this for me." The abuser flips the script and acts like they have been wronged and that the victim is inadequate or failed to meet their responsibilities. So they go from this to this. This tactic serves two key purposes for the abuser. By blaming the victim for not meeting their expectations, the abuser avoids taking responsibility for their unreasonable demands or their hurtful behavior. They shift the focus to the victim's supposed shortcomings instead of addressing their own abusive behavior. This is deflection. And two, now the victim is left feeling confused and guilty, doubting their own perceptions on what is fair and reasonable. They often internalize the blame, believing that if they just tried harder or if they just did things differently, they could meet the expectations of their abuser and restore peace within the relationship. This guilt keeps the victim trapped, constantly striving to meet the abuser's demands, even though those demands will always be out of reach. Over time, this manipulation begins to erode a victim's sense of self-worth and their reality. They will begin to question their own judgment, wondering if they really are to blame for all the problems within the relationship. And this confusion makes it really difficult for them to see the abusive patterns at play. And it often leads to a cycle where they try even harder to please their abuser. And the abuse often continues and escalates. The constant pressure to meet shifting unreasonable expectations creates a dynamic where the victim is always on edge, trying to predict or avoid the abuser's displeasure. This leads to emotional exhaustion, anxiety, and a sense of powerlessness as they come to believe that no matter what they do, it will never be enough. This tactic for blaming the victim of failing to meet entitled expectations also serves to reinforce the abuser's control. As the victim becomes more confused and guilt-ridden, they might isolate themselves from others, fearing judgment or believing that they're the problem. This isolation makes it even easier for the abuser to manipulate and control the narrative, cutting the victim off from outside support or perspectives that might help them recognize the abuse. Ultimately, weaponizing entitlement allows the abuser to maintain control, making the victim feel responsible for the relationship's problems. The abuser ensures that the victim stays focused on trying to fix themselves instead of looking at the abuser's behavior. This keeps the victim trapped in cycles of emotional manipulation, constantly seeking to meet unattainable expectations, while the abuser continues to exploit their power unchecked. This tactic not only reinforces the power imbalance, but it deepens the emotional and psychological manipulation and damage caused to the victim, making it even harder for them to break free from the abusive relationship. Now, on a larger scale, entitlement operates in systems like patriarchy, white supremacy, or economic privilege, where certain groups hold institutionalized power based on race, gender, or class. For example, the entitlement of historically dominant groups, such as white people in the context of white supremacy, creates a hierarchy that justifies unequal treatment of people of color. The mere belief that one group is inherently superior justifies discriminatory practices. The imbalance caused by entitlement leads to abuses of power, where the privileged group feels justified in maintaining and expanding their control, often at the expense of marginalized communities. This reinforces systemic inequality and makes it very difficult for those without power to challenge it. Baby, bye, bye, bye. Entitlement is at the core of all abusive dynamics. When someone believes they are inherently deserving of more respect, more control, more privileges, it creates a power imbalance that fuels manipulation and abuse. And we've seen how abusers weaponize this sense of entitlement to shift blame onto their victims, making them feel guilty or confused or powerless. Remember, the problem isn't that you're not enough. It's that their expectations are impossible for you to meet. In the next video, I'm going to be diving into the second pillar of abuse, which is objectification. I will explore how abusers reduce their victims to mere objects as tools to get their needs met, and how this dehumanization makes it easy for them to use people without any guilt or shame. I'll also take a look at how objectification shows up not just in our relationships, but in media and society. Stay tuned and thank you for watching. I can't take no more, it ain't no lie. I wanna see you out that door.
baby